Hi, my name is Fong, and I'll be going over the process of this painting commissioned by the Suicide Sheep YouTube group. I would like to thank them because they're a great group that helps promote awesome music and really great art. And at the beginning of this, I usually start in DAZ. Actually, in the beginning, I sketched out first, and then after I was done sketching it out, I started in DAZ. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. It was a continuation of a piece that I did for them before. It was for a artist called Essinger, and it was a different take on that piece or a continuation of it. And in this case, the story is about this girl kind of looking for that person. If you want to check out that piece, it's in my art station, or you could look through the Suicide Sheep YouTube channel and you could find it if you look up Essinger. So now I go back and forth a lot in different programs, but I usually would pose in DAZ, bring it into Marvelous, and simulate some clothing over it, and then render out in Blender. And at this point, everything is all rendered out, and I am starting to paint everything. So right here, just getting some lighting in. I usually start with the face and the eyes, just because it's the most important part of the painting. When it came from DAZ, it was kind of scary looking, mainly because it was hard to see where the eyes were. So I made sure to definitely push that to a style that I felt that was appealing, at least more appealing to me. And now here I'm just roughing out some effects, getting some interesting silhouette shapes. Trying to play around with the hair, see what kind of hairstyle I like. I definitely jump around a lot when I'm painting, so you'll see me do all sorts of stuff. Here I'm just separating out the different layers and adding some smoke and then some background elements. The reason why I went with trees was because in the previous painting, the dude was like wandering the forest. And I guess the story behind it is that he's leaving behind part of his kind of like his spirit, which is what the blue lines are supposed to be. And that's why I have the blue lines there as well. And then this kind of like half cyborg lady is looking for him with the trails of the blue lines. So now I'm just massing out some of the subtle kind of like cyberpunky lines. So she has metal arm, just because I haven't painted a metal arm in a while. So I want to try it out with a technique that was more rendered in Blender and then painted over with in Photoshop. So just getting more highlights throughout the face. I actually ended up not working on this piece for a little bit because I was quite busy with other stuff. So the advantage of sometimes using different techniques to help you paint or learning more techniques is that you can increase your workflow and take on more work, and with roughly the same fidelity. Sometimes it might not look super painterly, but it gets the job done. In this one, I did spend more time on it just because it was going to Suicide Sheep YouTube group. I really enjoy their channel. I really enjoy like what they do in terms of promoting artists and promoting music artists. So I wanted to make sure I do a good job on this one. If you're more interested in this technique, definitely give Blender a shot. Marvelous and DAZ. Combine all three together and see what you come up with. Another advantage is in Blender, it can help mass out environments a little bit quicker. If you have trouble painting environments, you can always use that to create a base environment and once again paint over it. So here I brought it into Zbrush to do some sculpting. I haven't used Zbrush in quite a bit, so you could see me just not knowing the tools very well. So I'm just essentially I was doing a very basic operation, which was just essentially isolating and separating out parts because I wanted to show that I wanted to have more kind of mechanical pieces in between the joint areas. So here's the first pass of it. I actually ended up changing it later on throughout this video. And then here I'm just kit bashing some mechanical pieces I had. So just render it out, and I didn't render it out yet. I think I wanted to go back into painting because painting is a lot more loose. You can be more free. Sometimes doing things in 3D can be very stiff. My goal is always to try and create the painting having it feel like it's not been done in 3D, because if it's done in 3D, it's very obvious. Sometimes everything's not as designed as the way you want it to, because in 3D everything's very accurate. So that's why I like to just kind of paint over everything and change the values. Also in 3D, you tend to get a lot more darker values than you want, or values that aren't as saturated or the right color that you're trying to go for. So always just kind of like going over things is very important. Here I started painting in some clouds using like a technique I used in another painting. I ended up not liking it, so this ended up being sort of a waste of time. However, it was like a good discovery of like, this is not working for this painting, or maybe I just didn't spend enough time on it. It could have worked, but in the end I decided to just use a more realistic approach and then paint over the more realistic approach to get a more stylized sort of fog in the background. Now I'm just, once again, I'm painting in more of the wisps of the spirit of the other painting. Eventually I would erase part of it too. Here I'm jumping back into the hair. The hair was simulated it wasn't simulated, but it was posed in DAZ, and I rendered it out in Blender with a hair shader, and it did a lot of work actually. I added a lot more subtle values and colors and highlights in the painting, but the hair in terms of the volume itself was mainly created in Blender. Here you could see that I'm adding in more of like this poppy kind of shine look to it, that it's almost like reminiscent of like anime hair. I really enjoyed that kind of look. That's why I added it. Here I'm adding in some lighting from the sun, moon. It ended up being a moon. I'm from Seattle, so right now our moon is definitely sort of trees, that color, which was from, once again, the other painting. So, and then here are some more leaves. Luckily, I had a decent amount of time to work on this. I have like a full-time job doing 3D, so sometimes I don't get a lot of time to just sit and paint, but most days I do end up, after I'm done working, I would just go and paint and try and work on my personal painting. The most important part is just keeping at it. It could be tiring, but there's always something to improve in art, and I enjoy improving as much as I can, and hopefully one day all this work will pay off. For now, having people check out my stuff and usually having a relatively positive response is enough for me to just keep on going and continue creating new pieces. So to anyone that's trying to do anything that's worth doing, the most important thing I would say is consistency and hard work, and hopefully you will get to wherever you're trying to be at in life. Here I am redoing the arm because I felt that the arm that I created in the beginning was a little bit boring. I wanted to break up the silhouette a little bit more. So I brought it back into Zbrush and just broke out more pieces to it. And now I am back in the Blender and deleted part of the clothing, and now I am putting on more mechanical bits to it. It's a nice contrast between like the simple smooth shapes of the shell of the arm, and then there's this complex machinery inside. So now I have render passes. Some people call it clown mask, but it's used to isolate different parts of the render. So in this case, I used it to isolate part of the arm, and now I just have the arm in its own pass. Here I'm just painting in a little bit more detail into the arm. I had the feedback to center the painting, so I decided to take a feedback because it was a very valid feedback. It was just a little bit to the left, and it was a perfect opportunity to center it. Here I am balancing the colors a little bit because it was a 3D render. Sometimes I try to not use a ton of black desaturated colors in my paintings, so I wanted to make sure that even the dark values or the dark areas in the painting still have a little bit of color. Here, just adding in some wires just to add in a little bit more detail. Here, I'm trying to break up the silhouette of the hand, but I ended up just not messing around too much with it. Sometimes it's a little bit time consuming to do things in 3D. It's just faster to paint. I ended up just painting these parts. I could have done it in 3D, but at the same time, I didn't want to do the fine details in 3D. I just ended up doing it in 2D. So here I'm just adding in some like random values just to add a little bit of kind of just color, because once again 3D does not like afford you just random colors all the time. Just to like make things pop, you have to do it yourself. So I always just try and add colors that aren't there, or colors. They're usually more intentional, but they're colors that help accent other colors. Sort of like underpainting you would see in painting sometime, but it's kind of just next to it. It simulates a little bit like chromatic aberration you would see. It just adds a little bit of extra color just to make other colors, the main colors that you're looking at, pop. It's like a secondary read. Here I'm just blending in the hair a little bit more just so that once again it breaks up that 3D artificial look, because it was very straight, that line, so I'm just trying to get rid of that. In the end, this painting did turn out very sharp, but I still enjoyed it a lot. It was still fun. Here's just adding in more color, and now just working on the sun, the moon area, and just kind of bouncing lights off of it, off of the character. I would say working with the Suicide Sheep YouTube channel is great because I do listen to a decent amount of electronic music. Actually, when I was painting this, I was listening to a little bit of Set the Sky, Alinium, and Odessa is an inspiration in some of the paintings I've done. And another big one would be Porter Robinson, which I have another painting that's sort of based on one of his YouTube videos, which is really cool. It kind of sucks that this year most of the festivals have been canceled, or music events, but it's important to keep your brain healthy. So listening to music always helps, and that's definitely helped a lot this year. And hopefully next year, when things open up, I'll be able to check out these artists in real life. Right now I'm painting over the fog that I had in the beginning. The first pass of the fog I made was a little bit too realistic in terms of the shape. So right now I'm trying to make it a little bit more stylized, a little bit more designed, so that it fits in with the painting a little bit better. This is almost close to the final, tweaking the colors, Just adding in, just trying to have more contrast between the values, so dark against light, light against dark. So for the leaves, I wanted to make sure they stood out more. Here I'm adding in some blur, some lens blur, so that I can make sure the characters in focus. Here I added a gradient filter or a gradient ramp, and then added a layer filter over it, layer properties, to make it a little bit more colorful, sort of like an Instagram filter in a way. Here I'm just adding in some accent colors just to make sure everything is not kind of stale, or just there's more to look at in the end. And this is the final painting. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I added a little bit more detail to the wisps at the very end that I didn't record, but there it is. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.